Hi, I'm Sam, and welcome to my channel. Oh, I'm very croaky this morning, excuse me. Um, so, this video is just going to be me trying to make sense of a few things I think I have greater clarity on to do with complex trauma and my own healing process. And I'm going to talk about trust and healing the past, changing the past, and in changing the past, maybe actually believing that we deserve goodness and the life that seems so close that might as well be a million miles away until we start believing we deserve it. So I'm going to try and pull those thoughts together and share something useful and coherent. But I also have a poem to read from this book, and it's the title poem, Still Possible. It's quite long, which is why I haven't read it before, but I'm going to read the whole thing. And I came to it again this week, and I realised, excuse me, I realised that I'd only read it maybe once or twice myself. And so I rediscovered it this week, and I thought, gosh, I've got to share that. So I'm going to read that in a minute. And Corinna Cohn and I are going to do another video tomorrow, and we're going to explore regret, how to even begin to process regret, because a huge part of regret, acknowledging regret, is being honest with ourselves. And if we can't be honest with ourselves about how we feel, then how can we be honest with anyone else? So that's a huge part of regret, is honesty. So we're going to explore that tomorrow in a video, and I'll publish that midweek probably. So, what do I have to say on trust? Each morning, when I can, when it's not too windy, because the water, the loch, is too choppy when it's too windy. Each morning I walk down to the shore and I try and go for a swim. And some days I turn around because I'm too scared. Some days I turn around and then I turn around again and I get in for a few seconds, and or a minute or two. And if I have a good day, I stay in for a few minutes and I swim for a little bit. But it's not exercise. It's not exercise. It's therapy. It's part of my process, because I'm so terrified. I'm not terrified of the cold or being alone on the water. I'm terrified because, the water represents the barrier between the known, the seen, and the unknown, the unseen, the fear. And I don't know what's beneath me, what's around me, and it's terrifying for me. And, my nervous system, my mind, it was conditioned by fear, terror really. So, it's very, very difficult to break that conditioning. The expectation that something terrible is just about to happen. And the mistrust that anything good can happen. And I realised that this week when I was swimming, and I thought, what is this fear? It's because I don't trust anything good can happen. And so, when I realised that, I've had a lot of things happen over the last week or two that have just been very, very difficult. But, I realised that I needed help as well, because, like I said, my nervous system was conditioned in terrifying situations. So it's like, I've been grieving now for a year, and that's one aspect of the healing, is to release the feelings, to validate the feelings that you invalidated as a child by saying, no, I shouldn't feel this, it's my fault, I'm wrong, I'm corrupt. It's validating those feelings, feeling them now, purging that emotion, cleansing yourself with that emotional outpouring, changing the past. can't change what happened, but you can change who you thought you were. And that is immensely healing. And it's the beginning of understanding that it's not your fault, it never was. And that maybe you do deserve a different life. And that life is so close. It's literally a hair's breadth away. And I can feel it now. I wake up some mornings and I can feel it. I can feel a life of possibility and goodness and intimacy. And it's so close. But the only thing in the way is me. Is me. And I'm pushing up against that barrier. I'm pushing up against the barrier within myself because I don't think I deserve it. I don't truly believe that I deserve it and that I'm good. So, as I push up against that barrier periodically, every week or two, really, I try and change. I try and change my life. I try and change myself. And as I come up against a behaviour, a thought pattern, a coping strategy, the refuge of those rigid thoughts, I hit it and it feels immovable. It feels immovable. And it resists, and my body resists. It won't let me through. And over the days I get building tension until I break, and then the grief. But for about 2 months now, excuse me, for about 2 months now, I've been going to bed at night and I can feel my whole body vibrating from the anxiety and the tension. And then I wake up periodically throughout the night 3 or 4 times and I can still feel my body vibrating. I wake up in the morning and I'm still shaking. And it's, I think Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's like the body knows. And it's resisting because really I fear freedom. I fear freedom. I fear to trust myself, to trust that the world is a good place to be and that I deserve the life that's so close. And my body is just resisting. It's crazy. So this week I got to a point and I just thought I need to get help. Because I was having a super intense therapy for the last year, and it was too much. It was way too much, and all the therapist was doing really was holding up a mirror for me and saying, "Look how cruel you are to yourself. Listen to yourself." But because it's just we become our own abuser. I refused to change, and I was even defending my own thought processes. So it was a very difficult process, but we did make a lot of progress. And after every session, I fell apart and reformed with greater clarity and a greater insight. And it was very transformative. It was very transformative, but it was too intense. And so I stopped because I've got surgery coming up, and I didn't want to keep going through intense therapy as well as going through the intensity of having life-changing surgery. So I postponed the therapy until after the surgery. But this week I realised that I need support, and so I reached out to my GP, who is amazing, and she's been really, really helpful. And I started to talk to a counsellor that helped me in the past, who isn't a CPTSD specialist, but he's learning about it now. So we had a chat for about an hour, and just the relief of just talking and somebody nodding in understanding, like they know what I'm talking about. And he had a book on his desk that I've already read, and so we talked about that. And I just thought, I think the reluctance to trust is because we know that if we bring other people into our lives and we share the burden of what it is we're going through, that we'll crumble. And, when we are surviving, we're a fortress of stoicism and strength. But you can't live your life in a fortress. You need to drop the drawbridge and go outside into the country waiting. The world is waiting. And it's this close. It's this close. And the only thing in the way of our own freedom and healing is us. And the conditioning of our nervous system and our minds. I refuse to accept that I cannot change. I refuse to accept that I cannot have the life that I can just literally taste right now. And all I have to do is allow myself to cross that barrier within me. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And so, I'll get to the poem in a sec. I just have a couple more things to say. That I've talked a lot about in my videos that I think the healing, for me anyway, it was about trying to find something before trauma, something before that feeling of being corrupt. And it's like a return to innocence. And I've said that so many times. It's a return to innocence, a return to ourselves. Can we find that innocence in our childhood before we crushed it, or it was crushed? Can we find that and saying, yes, that's me. That's me before everything happened. So for me, I was born into difficulty. So there is no before. There is no before those feelings. But I do remember a time when I was still trying to connect, trying to give love, trying to form bonds of trust and love, that stopped around, between 7 and 9. And then I just became a shell and I just withdrew completely and stopped even trying to connect. And so, my thoughts about what I mean when I say it's a return to innocence, a return to ourselves. I think the innocence is uncontrived being. It's identity without strategies, without performance, without manipulations. And so when we don't have those basic needs met when we're a child, love, care, safety, protection, stability, we learn to manipulate others into giving us what we need, even if that's changing yourself into something you think is more acceptable. It's a manipulation, it's dishonest. And that sets up this dark, complex loop of self-hate, because you're not being honest. And it feeds into this feeling of something being wrong with you, some unworthiness, some sense of corruption, that you cannot have a pure relationship, a truthful, honest relationship, because you're manipulating. And so the return to innocence is the healing, the seeing with clarity now of the past and saying there was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong, it wasn't my fault. Validating those emotions that you couldn't feel, grieving, changing how you see yourself as a child. This is just my journey I'm sharing. So, if this makes sense to you, that's good. But this is how I make sense of the process. So it's changing my perception of myself as a child. Not hating myself. And then learning that I don't have to be anything other than what I am now. I don't have to pretend to be anything. I don't have to change myself for acceptance. I don't have to manipulate others into seeing me how I want to be seen. I am who I am what I am. And, that return to innocence, the return to uncontrived being, it's a return to the essential gift of our life. It's a discovery. It's a discovery. A never-ending discovery. And if you can change your perception of yourself as a child to heal that sense of being corrupt, I think it's the beginning of believing that you deserve the life that seems so out of reach, so impossible to connect with. And it's the beginning of belief that you are good and deserving and worthy of life. Your life has value. So this is all just really happening for me, and I'm just making sense of it as I'm talking now. So change the past, and you can have the future you deserve. Okay, time for a poem. It's a long one. So my voice is very croaky this morning, as you can hear, so hopefully I can last for a few minutes as I read this. I'm going to share a few thoughts on this afterwards as well, because it's such a powerful poem. And, it's David Whyte, so it's intense as well. He wrote this whole book, I think, through lockdown. And the poetry is very different to his other poetry. It's very intense. Sometimes dark as well. So, okie dokie, here we go. This is Still Possible by David Whyte. It is still possible to be kind to yourself, to drop constraints and fall off into your knees. It's not too late now to bow to what beckons, the world still swimming around you as you kneel transfigured by what sweeps on. It's still possible to leave every fearful former self in the wake of newly heard words issuing from an astonished mouth. It's still possible to feel your body as fully here and fully you, but not quite your own. To find you can live both entirely as yourself and in the lovely anonymous multitude of elements around you, that you have always been a brother and a sister to the clouds beyond the window, or have lived your secret unspoken marriage with the pale blue sky for more years than you could ever remember, and that you have always been proud to be, through all your difficulties, a loyal companion and friend to the foaming tide, coming and going, appearing and disappearing with you and for you, day after day on the ceaseless shore. It's still possible, amongst all the never-ending movement, to hold the necessary anchorage, while having a mind for the long migration, to be ready to up and go and then surprisingly be gone. It's not too late to imagine that the days to come are the lost children you are still to bring to birth and bring to maturity. I need to read that again. Listen to this. It's not too late to imagine that the days to come are the lost children you are still to bring to birth and bring to maturity, and that you are ready once more to be selfless on their behalf, setting them to rights when they fall, listening when they lose faith, being that mother or father who through all the difficulties gives the gift of constant witness. We need to be the parent to ourselves. It's still possible to intuit a magnificent individual arrival that brings you still closer to the accompanying faraway crowd, to live bravely and always, as someone said, to the point of tears, to realize that you have always had your life shattered and your heart broken and your faith tested by loving too much and too often, and that all along it was never too much and never too often, and that you were never ever fully broken. No, it's still possible to feel that spring is in the air, to intuit that these days are pilgrim days, that they are mornings for setting out and setting off, early hours when new oh no. Okay, I'll start that verse again. No, it's still possible to feel that spring is in the air, to intuit these days as pilgrim days, that these mornings are for setting out and setting off, early hours when new stories have already begun, mornings to understand that you are now living fully in some secret parallel where you can just as well go anywhere by going nowhere, when you can stay at home and find in any given hour or day, in the quiet kitchen, the just culmination of a practiced sincerity, when you can learn the daily minutiae of giving up and giving in, the beautiful but necessary fasting into submission, of resting through not doing, or not eating, or not hating, or not taking, or not judging too quickly, of learning how easily you can free yourself and how easily you can forget who needed to be impressed and who needed to be punished. And most of all, recounting who you needed to forgive so bravely for hurting you so deeply, to practice every day the difficult art of being proudly abstemious but disarmingly generous, of learning to entertain the unsettling truth that from the very beginning, through all your difficulties, you have been learning to pass on every single thing you ever earned, every single thing you never fully deserved, back to those who have never found it in their power to receive. Yes, it's still possible not to hold so tightly to what you think is true, to bend your head and assume humility beneath the eaves of a still spreading sky, to feel in the rain upon your upturned face how you have always been friends with the distant horizon, no matter how far and how faint its call. Yes, it's still possible to be a soul on its way to a beautiful, beckoning and bountiful somewhere, looking for the gift you will bring back to the time of your birth. And that's what we're doing. Looking for the gift you will bring back to the time of your birth, so that you can start living again from the very first moment you came into this life, changing the past. But this time with the cleaner earned simplicity of knowing what it has taken you so long to learn, to ask for forgiveness by being forgiveness, to live more generously by greeting yourself more generously, and then to dance more bravely, to speak more suddenly, and with a free heart to undo as you go all you do wrong, and to right the wronged and unsettle the self-righteous, sharing the secret to happiness with everyone. Yes, oh yes, it's still possible to taste the natural God-given sweetness in every cloud in the sky, in every little you eat, in every breath you take, in every hand that you touch, in every day that you wake, in every tear that you shed, in every voice still waiting to call you, in every once solid, immovable door now calling you through, and in every single blessed moment turning to the next. It's still possible to fully understand you have always been the place where the miracle has happened. That you have been since your birth, the bread given and the wine lifted, the change witnessed and the change itself. That you have been all along a goodness that can continue to be a goodness to itself. It's still possible in the end to realize why you are here and why you have endured and why you might have suffered so much, so that in the end you could witness love miraculously arriving from nowhere, crossing bravely as it does, out of darkness from the great and spacious stillness inside you, to the simple light-filled life of being said. Can you say, I love you? Can you say I love you to yourself? Can you do that? Because you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. You can't give your life as a gift if you don't think you're worthy of that gift in the first place. So we can change the past. Now read this bit again. It's still possible to be a soul on its way to a beautiful, beckoning and bountiful somewhere, looking for the gift you will bring back to the time of your birth, so that you can start living again, from the very first moment you came into this life. We can heal the past. We can't change what happened, but we can heal ourselves. And that transcends time and place. It extends into the past, extends into the future. And we are where that forgiveness happens, where that love begins. So can you say that you love yourself? If not, why not? Okay. I hope that made sense. I've had a really difficult week, and I'm just sort of trying to pull it all together in my own mind and make sense of it all. So, thank you to everyone that comments and that reaches out and writes me an email. Thank you all, and thank you everyone for your continued support in the comments. And yeah, I shall see you soon. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.